So now that we know kind of how cameras and how the human eyes see, we're going to look at a little bit at the different types of lights that are coming into play when we're dealing with studio lighting or ENG types of lighting. So we want to talk about different kinds of light because there are different ways to get light sources, and they can either be an advantage or a disadvantage depending on how we need them. So the first type of light we have is the sun, but the sun is not the best source of light because throughout the day it changes. It gets brighter, it gets darker, it changes color, and then for maybe up to half a day, it disappears. And if there's weather conditions like clouds or not, they can come in and affect how things look. Now, if you're dealing with a very short video shoot that's going to last a few minutes, shooting in particular sunlight may be ideal. If you're trying to find a perfect effect of sunlight, like a sunset or a sunrise, then you're going to have to plan your shoot around that time, and you only have a very narrow window in which to work. But the sun is a viable source of light, but not one of the best because of how unpredictable it can be when you're trying to plan things out in advance. So one of the first types of light that we have is what's called an incandescent light. And this is less intense than the sun pretty dramatically. Its color temperature comes in the realm of about 3,200 degrees Kelvin, and it's a little more yellow than sunlight. And incandescent lights can be corrected with types of for daylight with types of filters. So we can take a type of a color changing coat and apply it to the incandescent light bulb to modify how it looks. But this is basically a glass ball that has a filament inside, and that filament, it becomes so hot it starts glowing. And so we've had a wide variety of incandescent light bulbs in different types and shapes. And so in here we've got the glass globe that has an inert gas in it, and then there's the filament that once it reaches a certain temperature, it starts glowing. Now there are other types of incandescent lights that come in, like tungsten, halogen. But one thing to note with incandescent light bulbs is that they get very, very hot when they're on, and when you just have turned them off, they're still going to retain a lot of heat. So depending on what you're trying to do, it may take a moment for you, like if you're trying to change out a light bulb that just died, it may take a moment, or you're going to need special gloves or something to grab a hold of the instrument to adjust the lighting. So here's a question for you, a little piece of trivia. How hot do incandescent bulbs get? Well, check this little video out and we'll give you an idea. All right.
Incandescent light bulbs actually generate more heat than light. Switch to energy efficient CFLs and LEDs, and you'll realize just how much incandescent light Incandescent light bulbs actually generate more heat than light. Switch to energy-efficient CFLs and LEDs, and you'll realize just how much cash you were really burning through. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at energysavers.gov.
So the question is, how hot do incandescent light bulbs get? Well, they can generate up to 392 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 200 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit, or they can get about 200 to 260 degrees Celsius, which for an incandescent light bulb is hot enough to cook off of. Now, I'm not sure I would want to have a chicken that was cooked off of 100 light bulbs, but I might take a cake that was cooked off of maybe one light bulb. Maybe. There was a fun little instrument that many people here had in their childhood called an easy bake oven. And an easy bake oven was a small box that you can kind of see here in the corner that would have like 100-watt light bulb. And you could take a cake, slide it into the oven, and let it sit for about 20 or 30 or 40 minutes. And that little 100-watt light bulb would cook the cake. Now here you see like times and numbers. Those are just stickers. They don't apply. You would just push the cake in and then it would push it through to the other side. So even from our use, people have been cooking things over a small light bulb. Now, we talked about incandescent, so this is another type of light that is commonly seen and used. And these are called fluorescent lights. Now, traditionally, they're in the 5,000, so the 56K range of Kelvin. They're more yellow than sunlight, but they're also more blue than incandescent. So when you're looking at the incandescents, you have the bluish orange. Here you're the yellowish orange for incandescents. The fluorescents are getting into more of the bluish, whitish sort of light. So these can be, and one of the nice things about these is they can be colder to touch than the incandescents. So with the incandescents, they're still hot for a while, but these put out a lot less heat, and they come in a variety of shapes. A lot of times I'll see them in office buildings as long tubes of fluorescent lights, and each of these bays may hold about 2 lights. They've gotten into bending them into smaller formats by curving them, and then they even have small spirals. So these are compact fluorescent light bulbs that many people have in their house. So they do have an advantage over incandescent light bulbs. And one of the things about fluorescents is you can change they're manufactured to have different color temperatures. So you can get a fluorescent light bulb in the 3200K, which is like your soft whites, your yellow and orange. You can get them in the 35 to 41, which is sort of your lightish and your blues. You can also get them in 56 to 65, which is natural light or daylight. So the fluorescents, you can actually change to different colors depending on how they're manufactured. Incandescents, it's a lot harder to do that. So fluorescents have been in use in studios, and there's many advantages to them. For one, they're cooler operating temperatures, so there's lower cost for their operation because they do use less energy. Now, with the incandescent light bulbs, they were hotter and they produce more energy. And when our studio had all of these lights in the ceiling filled with incandescent light bulbs, the temperature in that studio could easily jump up 10% or 10 degrees while we were in the studio for an hour or two. And so fluorescents didn't get as hot, so we didn't have to worry about spending as much time in the heat. Now, there is a disadvantage to the fluorescents in that they cost more money to manufacture than an incandescent. So you're going to be spending more money at the beginning of the cycle of the light when you buy it. Now, their light only covers a wide area. With incandescents, you're able to manufacture a device that can kind of focus the beam into a tighter area. Fluorescents don't put out enough energy or light that they could do that as well. So they were just good at covering large areas of the screen. So they could not be focused. Now, in order for a fluorescent bulb to work, part of the gas that's inside of it is contains mercury vapor. And mercury is dangerous for humans to imbibe into their body, either through contact through their skin where it can be absorbed, or by breathing in mercury vapor from an fluorescent light that's been broken. So if a bulb breaks, manufacturers recommend that you leave it alone and you get proper equipment to handle the broken glass, any dust or vapor that may have settled. So they don't want you immediately taking a broom and trying to clean up, because you're going to stir up the mercury vapor, and that could lead to health issues. And so because of this, a lot of fluorescent lights are starting to be phased out, and newer technology like LEDs, I'm going to talk about in a moment, are taking over their place. Speaking of LEDs, so LEDs have been around for a while, but they've only recently become more popular because of some advances in their design. And with LEDs, what is known as a light emitting diode, an LED. And you can get these in available of different colors like red, green, blue, and white. And with LEDs, you're able to adjust their color temperature. They can be put into a wide variety of designs and configurations to produce a desired effect. If you've ever seen a large video board at a sporting event, or even an electronic video board on an advertisement walking around a city or driving around a town, you may see some video boards that are displaying videos or other animations or information or graphics. These are going to pretty much be using LED technology. And so, like I said, LEDs have been around, but they've only had limited use, because for the while we only had red, green, and amber as the three choices for our LEDs. And you could use them in a basic calculator. Some computers use them as an indicator for either on or off or status, but they never really changed colors, or you couldn't combine them all. In the case of this video game from late in the 1970s and 1980s, you had little red LEDs that would indicate players and plays, and you were able to play a basic game, unlike our cell phones that can do a much greater option today. And the problem of this was, because like I said, when we're dealing with television and color and light, we deal with three main colors: red, green, and blue. Well, when I look at the ones that we've had forever, we've had red and green, but no blue, just the amber. So we weren't able to use them to create a full spectrum. That wasn't until about 1994 when Suji Nakamura of the Nichiya Corporation was working in a lab, and he was tasked with the creation of a blue LED. And this happened to him back in the, I think, late 70s, early 80s. And it took him nearly 20 years to finally figure out how to create the blue filament to give us a blue light. And then shortly after he came up with blue, he was able to modify that to give us a white light as well. So he added blue and white to our red and green spectrum. And so now we have everything that we need to create most of the other colors in the light spectrum. And so because of this, we now were able to create white light panels, and this is what led to things like LED arrays. So instead of having a single diode, I now have a panel with hundreds or thousands of diodes. And one of the advantages is you can adjust the color temperature, and it has even lower cost of operation. So with this, I can adjust a dial in the back of the panel and change the color from 3200 to 56K to fit my lighting needs. Now, a downside to LED lighting is these cost more to manufacture than fluorescents or incandescents. But an advantage is they use less electricity, they last a lot longer, so we're not going to be replacing them as much. So in this case, a unit value like this may cost like $1,800 compared to a incandescent panel of bright light may only use about $300 to $500. So that's a third of the cost of this panel, but this panel may wind up lasting a lot longer. So when we're looking at brightness and energy use of different types of lights, so if we are going to basically use something to create 30,000 hours worth of lights, we're going to need about 30 incandescent light bulbs, and we're going to spend about $300 because we're going to have to keep changing the light bulbs out. And at 75 watts per light bulb, that's using a lot of electricity. So in the case of fluorescents, to do that same amount of 30 hours, we, instead of using 30, we only need 4. And they're only using a fraction of the energy that all of these use. So again, our total energy usage is coming down to $80 from $300. Now, if we want to go for 30,000 hours, we could also do that in just one single LED light. And it's only using 10 watts, which is far less than the other two. And because we don't have to change out materials, change out light bulbs, we can just use that one. We can only have to worry about spending $40 in electricity. Now, because of this, this bulb is going to be more expensive to manufacture than the fluorescents, which are more expensive than the incandescents. But the basic idea is they can be just as bright, if not brighter. They can last longer. And in the long run, they're cheaper to have because you don't have to buy as many when one breaks. And so one of the things that has come out of this type of technology was a scientific law called Heitz's Law. And he basically observed and created a forecast about the steady improvement of technology, and in this case, LED lights over a couple of generations. And Hight's law states this: every decade, the cost per lumen, which is a unit of light emitted, falls by a factor of 10. The amount of light produced for a LED will increase by a factor of 20 given the wavelength or the color of light. So in a nutshell, this law says is that over time, things are going to get cheaper and they're going to get brighter. And you've probably seen this in a lot of different technologies. When large screens, TVs, and LEDs first came out, they were probably in the $10,000 ranges for the first generation. Now you can get a large one for $100, or for the bigger ones about maybe $700-800. So as time has gotten on and we've gotten better at manufacturing them, the technology and the LEDs have again gotten brighter and they've gotten cheaper to manufacture. And that's what Hight's law says. And it doesn't really apply just to LED lights. It applies to a lot of technology that over time we get better at manufacturing them. We find new, cheaper, easier ways to do it that's going to save us time and money. So a while back, we redid all the lighting in our studio, and this is our old studio that we replaced and upgraded with the one that you saw behind me at the beginning of this lecture. So how much do you think it costs to take out all of these lights that were incandescents and to put up LED lights? Now, mind you, we did this for 2 studios. So do you think it may have cost $10,000, 20, 50, $5 million? Well, the answer is it cost us $107,000 to replace all the lights in this lighting grid in 2 studios. Now, that being said, in the time that we've had it, we've only had to replace 1 instrument because it was faulty. But we've had the same instruments for the last 7-8 years, and we don't have to keep changing out bulbs to those instruments. And so when we're talking about color temperature and color lights, the cameras have to be adapted to that color temperature. And there's different ways to adapt a camera to all these different types of lights: sunlight, incandescence, fluorescence. And for this, you can use different types of filters. The first one I'm going to look at is what's called a neutral density filter, or a little color wheel. The second type of filters can be electronic and done through settings in a menu. The third setting is going to be what's known as a white balance, which this is an electronic setting where you tell the camera what white looks like under various lighting, and it'll adjust for all the other lighting, all the other colors in the spectrum. Now, one of the things to note about a white balance is that whenever you adjust the lighting in one environment, if you change environments and becomes brighter, darker, different color temperature, you're going to have to re-white balance again. And then if you come back to the original, you're going to have to re-white balance as well. Now, in a television studio, this is less of a factor because we tend to keep the same lighting for all of our different various sets. So we don't have to really white balance every time we move a camera to change a set, because the entire studio is lit in the same type of lighting. So when we're talking about getting a white balance, this is usually like just a white piece of paper or a card that can be held up. And so what happened here in this case was a person shot a picture using a standard studio lighting, and then they changed the lighting, but not the picture, but not the setup of the camera. So they simulated a cloudy day, and all of a sudden you see more oranges are coming out. Daylights, it's getting a little more. If they set it for a fluorescent light, look how blue it turned. If they do a, I'm sorry, that was tungsten. If they change it to a fluorescent light, then you're going to get a little less blue, but a little more white. And then when the last one, they do a color correction and they set the camera for the current lighting situation by using a white balance, your colors come out better and they come out more accurate. So when you do a white balance and you do it right, and I'm hiding that one guy, you can't really tell that anything is wrong. So when you do it right, it looks good. Although when you do it wrong, it sticks out like a sore thumb. So you can see in these top and bottoms that our white balance was set for outdoors and they went inside. So now everything's kind of a yellowish orange. Now these two in the middle that are blue, they had originally white balanced balanced inside under 3200K, and then they came outside and shot it. And because of that, the camera wasn't set up to record that color of white. And we'd have to try to fix this in post-production, but that may not always be the easiest way to do it. So, ways to correct this. The first one I talked about is a neutral density filter. And this is a little disc that's inside the camera that has different thicknesses of a filter that can let in more or less light. So as it gets brighter, you can probably turn the dial, and so it's going to let less light in, and it's going to help create a cleaner image. And on many cameras, you'll see this as a little physical switch or a knob on the camera. So when you think about a neutral density filter, you need to think about how sunglasses work. When it's too bright, you put the filter on your eyes and it lets in less light, and it's able to see things a lot easier. So there are different types of filters, and you have some that can let in a little bit of light, some that can let in a lot of light. So neutral density filters kind of work a lot like sunglasses for your head. And so that's one of the few ways that you can change lights and lighting for your camera. And so we can use all of this technology to help create a perfect lighting situation for when we're trying to get an interview, or we're trying to do something either in a studio or outdoor in electronic